I'm sorry, ma'am, but we need to check your bag, right here, in front of everyone. The guards flanked Danica as her belongings were dumped onto the marble counter, live streams rolling, laughter rising, and someone shouted, "She's probably here to scam us." But just as the crowd jeered and security reached for her arm, the glass doors burst open, and a line of black SUVs screeched to a stop outside. On a crisp October morning, the kind that makes Manhattan's skyline shimmer like glass, Danica Hayes stepped through the revolving doors of Langston Trust Bank. Her light blue blouse was neatly tucked into faded gray slacks, and her scuffed leather flats moved soundlessly across the marble floor. In her hands, she held a simple canvas tote, nothing more than a folded withdrawal slip and a well-worn wallet inside. Around her, the air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and entitlement. The lobby gleamed under the glow of chandeliers that sparkled like they'd been polished with diamonds. This wasn't just any bank. Langston Trust was a shrine to exclusivity, a fortress for the elite where accounts rarely dipped below 7 figures and where the staff prided themselves on spotting outsiders the moment they stepped through the door. And this morning, Danica was that outsider. Tony, a broad-shouldered security guard with a buzz cut and an ego to match, caught sight of her immediately. His gaze slid over her shoes, lingered on the absence of makeup, and settled on the tote in her hand. With a crooked smile and just loud enough for those near the front desk to hear, he said, "You here to deliver something? Or did you take a wrong turn on your way to housekeeping?" A man in a navy pinstripe suit chuckled, sipping from a double espresso. Danica's lips lifted into a polite, measured smile. "I'm here to make a transaction," she said gently, her voice smooth as a cello note. She stepped forward, unbothered by the stares, and made her way toward the teller line. Behind the mahogany counter stood Brooke, a young woman with sharp cheekbones, perfectly styled hair, and nails that looked like they cost more than Danica's entire outfit. Her eyes swept over Danica with barely concealed disdain. "Ma'am, the ATM is located outside," she said, her tone sugary and false. "This line is for clients." Danica met her gaze calmly. "I am a client. I'd like to withdraw $500 in cash, please." Brooke blinked, then laughed. It wasn't the kind of laugh that welcomed humor, it was the kind that cut. "500, she repeated loudly, drawing the attention of those around them. "We don't usually process small change at this counter. Maybe the gas station down the block can help you out." People in line turned. Whispers started. Phones discreetly tilted upward. A young woman in a red coat raised her phone and began recording, whispering, "This is gonna go viral." Brooke leaned closer, her voice now a hiss dripping with condescension. "Honestly, I thought you were here to apply for a janitorial job." Danica stood tall. Her hands were still, her posture impeccable. "The ATM outside is out of order," she replied evenly. "I've had an account here for over 3 years. Please process my request." Brooke sneered and clicked into her screen. 3 years, she said loudly. "Under what name?" "Because I'm not seeing anything under Danica Hayes." "Are you sure you're not thinking of a community bank?" A laugh rippled through the line. Someone behind Danica muttered, "She probably found a deposit slip in the trash." The tension in the air thickened. Danica's voice didn't waver. "Please check again." Brooke raised an eyebrow, then looked up with mock surprise. "Oh wait, here we go." She turned to the microphone mounted at her counter. "Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause," she announced sarcastically. "Ms. Danica Hayes believes this is her bank. Despite looking like she walked in from a yard sale, she's here to claim she belongs at Langston Trust." The crowd laughed. A man in an expensive overcoat shouted, "Maybe she wants to open a savings account with food stamps." Danica remained still. Her fingers gripped the edge of the counter, but her voice remained composed. "If there's a problem with my request, I'd like to speak to the branch manager." At that, Assistant Branch Manager Lucas Trent approached, drawn by the spectacle. He was in his mid-40s, hair slicked back like a 1980s villain, his cufflinks gleaming. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, already eyeing Danica like she was gum stuck to his imported leather shoes. Brooke laughed lightly. She wants to withdraw $500. I told her this isn't a community credit union. Lucas turned to Danica, his tone shifting into full performance mode. Ms. Hayes, he said loudly, Langston Trust is a premium institution. Our clientele expects a certain standard. Danica nodded. And I expect to access my own funds without being insulted. Lucas's smile was cold. Ma'am, we've had issues with people claiming accounts that don't exist. Now, I'll have to ask you to leave, unless you'd prefer we involve security. Without waiting for her answer, he nodded at Tony, who stepped forward with another guard in tow. The crowd leaned in. Phones were out. Live streams began. This is disgusting, someone whispered, not in protest but delight. Tony stood beside Danica. Let's go, ma'am. Danica's voice was low. I haven't done anything wrong. Lucas gestured to her tote. Let's be safe. Check her bag. We've had data theft incidents before. Tony hesitated, but Lucas insisted. Do it. Danica's tote was taken from her hands. Her wallet, a pen, and the folded slip were dumped out like garbage across the teller counter. Brooke smirked. Look at this. A whole $500 request and not even a designer wallet. The crowd erupted in cruel laughter. A woman in a pearl necklace whispered, "This is gold." A man in a cashmere coat added, "She probably printed that slip at home." Then came the worst of it. As Tony patted her down, gently, but publicly, Danica stood still, her face composed, her eyes forward. But the pain of humiliation clung to her like static. Someone tossed a receipt at her feet. Another person shouted, "Go back to the corner store." Brooke raised her phone. "Say cheese," she said, as if this were some joke. Danica gathered her things with grace, even as the tears threatened to rise. She was nearly at the door when someone shoved her tote, and its contents spilled again. A younger man in a velvet blazer kicked a pen across the floor. "Pick it up, janitor," he laughed. Danica knelt, her fingers steady, her spirit burning quietly beneath the surface. Behind her, Lucas barked, "Escort her off the premises before she causes more of a scene." Marble echoed beneath her flats as the two guards flanked her again. Outside the glass doors, the city buzzed on, unaware of the firestorm brewing behind those gold-lettered windows. Danica took one more look over her shoulder, not with anger, but with something deeper. Resolve. Because what no one in that room knew, not Brooke, not Lucas, not the crowd that mocked her, was that the woman they dismissed was married to the man who held Langston Trust's entire future in the palm of his hand. And he was only seconds away. Danica was only a few paces from the door when the sound of tires screeching outside shattered the rhythm of the humiliation parade. The marble lobby froze mid-laughter, mid-live stream, mid-insult. Even Lucas Trent, who had just ordered her out like an unwanted guest, turned his head sharply toward the gleaming glass doors. Outside, a sleek convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the curb, their tinted windows reflecting the gilded nameplate of Langston Trust like a warning. The automatic doors parted with a hush, and silence fell over the crowd like a sudden snowstorm. From the lead vehicle stepped a man whose very presence rearranged the air. He was tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably composed in a charcoal gray suit tailored so perfectly it looked etched in stone. His silver-streaked hair caught the lobby light with dignified grace, and his blue eyes scanned the room with unshaken calm. Phones began to lower. Whispers darted across the marble like wind. "That's Graham Whitaker." Someone muttered. "No way. He never shows up anywhere." Another gasped, "That's the guy from Whitaker Holdings. He's worth billions." Danica didn't move. Her fingers tightened slightly around her tote, her eyes steady but now quietly focused on the man striding toward her with purpose. He cut through the crowd like they weren't even there, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the frozen employees, ignoring the sea of gawking faces and shocked mouths. When he reached Danica, his hand reached up to her shoulder, not with urgency, not with showmanship, but with the quiet intimacy of someone who knew her heart. "You okay, D?" he asked softly, his voice low and warm, meant only for her. Danica looked up at him, her expression barely shifting. But her smile, faint and sure, held centuries of dignity. "I'm fine, Graham," she said. "Always." Then he turned. Still keeping one hand gently on her shoulder, Graham Whitaker faced the crowd. His voice was calm, steady, and razor-sharp. "I'd like to withdraw $5.1 billion in cash. Right now." The words landed like a thunderclap. Brooke's mouth dropped open. Lucas staggered back slightly as if the marble had tilted beneath his feet. Phones began rising again, but this time the screens weren't capturing a laughingstock, they were capturing the collapse of a kingdom. "What, Mr. Whitaker," Lucas stammered, his voice losing its polished veneer, "I think there's been some mistake." "If you'd just give us a moment to—" "No mistake," Graham interrupted coolly. "I want every account under Whitaker Holdings closed. Corporate, private, trust, all of it. Now." Brooke scrambled at her screen, her fingers slipping on the keys. "Sir, I didn't realize she was with you." "She didn't say, she didn't have to," Graham cut in. "You should have treated her like a person." Murmurs erupted. Clients who'd sneered moments ago now stood pale and silent, their earlier bravado evaporating like mist. Danica reached into her tote with deliberate grace and pulled out a sleek matte black card with no name, only a gilded crest. She placed it gently on the counter in front of Brooke, who stared at it like it might bite her. "Swipe it," Danica said softly. Brooke hesitated, then slowly did as told. The screen blinked. Numbers rolled, fast, endless, and impossible. Her jaw slackened. This is showing $500 million, just in this account." "That's her personal balance," Graham confirmed. "So when she asked to withdraw $500, you mocked her. When she presented a withdrawal slip, you humiliated her in front of the entire room. And now," his eyes swept over Lucas, Tony, and every gawking client, "now you'll understand just how costly arrogance can be." Lucas swallowed hard. "Mr. Whitaker, please, surely we can—" "No. We can't," Graham said, voice flat. "Valerie," he called over his shoulder. A woman in a slate-gray suit appeared at the door, tablet already glowing. Her heels echoed across the floor as she approached, unfazed by the tense atmosphere. "Start the transfers," he instructed. "Move everything offshore. Immediately." Valerie nodded. "Already prepared. I just need confirmation from Danica." Danica stepped forward without hesitation, her blouse slightly wrinkled from the pat down, but her posture perfect. She looked at the terminal, entered her code, and approved the process with a single tap. Brooke stumbled back from the counter. "We didn't know," she whispered. "You didn't need to," Danica replied, her voice like velvet over steel. "Respect doesn't require a resume." Chaos erupted in hushed waves. Executives from upstairs rushed into the lobby, pushing past stunned clients. One older man with a red tie and thinning white hair sprinted toward Graham. "Mr. Whitaker, I'm Edward Sloan, Regional Director. Please, there's no need to do this publicly. Let's go upstairs, discuss this in private." "You made it public," Graham said. "You let your staff humiliate my wife. You turned her dignity into a sideshow. Now the consequences are public, too." Behind them, the massive digital display flickered, and a live projection of the account balances draining from Langston Trust appeared like stock tickers in freefall. People gasped. Phones filmed. Comments flooded in on social media. Hashtag Danica Hayes and hashtag Bank Collapse began trending in real time. The woman who'd streamed Danica's humiliation earlier now whispered to her camera, "She's his wife. He's wiping the whole bank. This is real. Oh my God." Lucas reached for Danica with trembling hands. "Please, Miss Hayes, I didn't mean to." "You meant every word," she said, never raising her voice. "You saw my shoes, not my soul." "Don't do this," Lucas begged. "You'll ruin us." "No," Danica replied, eyes calm and unblinking. "You did that yourself." Valerie stepped in. We're 40% through the transfer. Estimated completion in under 3 minutes. Edward turned red. We'll lose everything, our investors, our rating, our reputation. You already lost your humanity, Graham said. The rest is just math. Brooke backed away from her station, her face ashen. I was just doing my job. Your job? Danica asked, arching one brow. Is your job to humiliate women for dressing plainly? To weaponize a microphone against someone trying to access her own money? That's not a job, it's cruelty wrapped in customer service. Valerie's voice broke in, cool and professional. All transfers confirmed. Langston Trust now holds 0 assets for Whitaker Holdings. A collective breath was drawn and released, as if the very bank had been drained of life. Graham turned to Danica, his voice once again low, intimate. We don't have to stay another second. She nodded once. Let's go. They turned, walking side by side through the now silent crowd. Phones still watched. But no one spoke. No one dared. Tony stepped aside without a word. Lucas collapsed onto a bench, face in his hands. Brooke slumped against her counter. The clients who had laughed now looked away in shame. And as the doors slid shut behind them, Danica didn't look back. She didn't have to. The storm she left behind would rage long after she was gone. The heavy glass doors of Langston Trust hissed shut behind them, sealing off the chaos like the final note of a symphony crashing into silence. Danica and Graham stepped into the sunlight, hand in hand, as the convoy of black SUVs waited with engines idling, calm and powerful, just like the man who commanded them. Inside, the hush they left behind began to shatter. Phones rang. Executives shouted. Panic rippled through the marble halls like an earthquake whose tremors had only just begun. And at the center of it all stood Valerie Quinn, Graham's chief of staff, her gray suit unwrinkled, her expression unbothered, her tablet glowing with cascading figures that painted one truth: Langston Trust was bleeding out. Transfer complete, she announced coolly, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. All Whitaker Holdings assets have been successfully moved to secured offshore accounts. Corporate. Private. Trust. Every last dollar. Lucas Trent stumbled back as if slapped. Edward Sloan, the red-faced regional director, turned a shade paler than the marble beneath his polished shoes. You can't just strip everything from us, he choked, staring at the flickering financial dashboard as zeros populated across formerly colossal balances. We've been managing Whitaker's money for over a decade. Valerie didn't even look at him. Then you should have known better. Brooke stood paralyzed at her station, her hands trembling so hard she dropped the matte black card Danica had given her. It clattered onto the desk, its soft thud louder than any shout. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice brittle. I didn't know she was. You didn't need to know, Valerie cut in smoothly. Respect isn't conditional. It's foundational. And this institution just failed the most basic test of human decency. In the far corner of the lobby, the large digital screen, once used to mock Danica's supposed $500 balance, now broadcast the total depletion of Whitaker Holdings. $5.1 billion gone in less than 10 minutes. The room shifted. Clients, many of whom had joined in the mocking chorus just moments earlier, now gripped their phones in horror as hashtags exploded on every social platform. Hashtag Danica Hayes. Hashtag Bank Collapse. Hashtag Langston Trust Meltdown. One woman in a green designer trench coat clutched her pearl necklace. I just transferred my retirement fund here yesterday. My hedge account's still open, a man in an Armani jacket muttered. Is it safe? Panic snowballed. The live stream that had gleefully followed Danica's humiliation was now a tsunami of outrage, awe, and accountability. The same influencer who had captioned her video "Broke Girl at Langston Trust" now frantically edited the post. Update: she's married to a billionaire. Banks collapsing. Watch till the end. The view count soared past 120,000. Then 200,000. Danica's name was now in every comment thread from Wall Street to TikTok. Federal regulators, having been alerted through auto notifications tied to the transaction scale, were already en route. Reports of suspicious practices, discrimination, and client abuse filled news wires within minutes. Sloan turned to Valerie, desperation lining every wrinkle in his face. "Please. Stop this. We can issue an apology. We can reinstate the accounts. You had your chance," Valerie said. When Miss Hayes walked in that door, all she wanted was to withdraw $500 of her own money. Instead, you gave her a public crucifixion. And now the entire world is watching you burn for it. Lucas dropped into the nearest chair, his once slick hairline now matted with sweat. He looked up at Brooke with haunted eyes. "We're finished." Brooke didn't reply. Her fingers hovered over her terminal, paralyzed. "Miss Hayes," Sloan called out, even though she was long gone, his voice cracking under the pressure. "We didn't know. We didn't know who she was." Valerie glanced toward the doors, then back to Sloan. Her voice was firm, final. "That's exactly the problem." Outside, in the back seat of the lead SUV, Danica leaned her head against the window. The sunlight painted gold along the Manhattan skyline. She wasn't crying. She wasn't gloating. She simply sat still, breathing in her own silence, reclaiming her peace. Graham reached across the console and took her hand. "You didn't have to come here, Dee," he said softly. "I would have handled it." She turned to him with a calm smile. "I wanted to. Not for revenge. For closure. For every woman who's ever been looked at like she didn't matter." He nodded once. "You gave them something to remember." At that same moment inside Langston Trust, chaos reached a fever pitch. Clients began yelling, storming counters, demanding to close their accounts. Alarmed tellers scrambled to print balances and issue emergency withdrawals. Several investors called their brokers, trying to dump Langston Trust stock, which had already dropped 14% by the time CNN Business broke the story live. 20 minutes later, it was down 26%. Before the hour ended, it had crashed 41%. In a back hallway, Brooke was escorted out by security. She didn't protest. She didn't even cry. Her mind was already somewhere else, on the footage, on the recordings, on her name trending for all the wrong reasons. As the elevator doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of the screen still cycling through the names of former Whitaker accounts now marked closed. Lucas tried to rally. He called in legal. He called PR. He even begged the regional office to issue a public statement clarifying the misunderstanding. But it was too late. Valerie had already filed a misconduct report with regulatory authorities, complete with live-stream clips, digital receipts, and sworn declarations. Investigators were in the building before Lucas could even draft an apology. By early afternoon, news trucks parked along the curb outside. Reporters clamored for statements. Inside the now shattered vault of prestige and protocol, Edward Sloan addressed the press with a pale face and trembling voice, offering deep regret and a promise to review all internal practices. The clip aired on national television. But no one bought the spin. Not when millions had already seen the truth for themselves. By sunset, both Lucas and Brooke were fired. Official notices stamped banned from future banking employment, pending investigation, were delivered. Their reputations, once groomed to shine among Manhattan's finest, were now digital ashes. The internet had crowned its new icon. Not a celebrity. Not a CEO. But a woman in a light blue blouse and scuffed leather flats who never raised her voice, yet brought an empire to its knees. Danica and Graham returned to their quiet upstate home. No interviews. No headlines. Just the two of them, tucked into a space built on trust, not titles. That evening, as she stirred pasta on the stove, Danica looked over at Graham setting the table. "It's strange," she said quietly. "All that noise. And now, peace." He smiled. "You didn't just shut them down," he said. "You reminded them who we're supposed to be." She nodded once, her voice a whisper of truth. I didn't do it to break them, she said. I did it to rebuild what they forgot, dignity. And the world would remember. Not the bank's downfall. Not the trending tags. But the woman who asked for $500 and gave millions their voice. What happened to Danica Hayes wasn't just a moment of humiliation, it was a mirror. A mirror held up to a society that far too often judges by appearance, treats kindness as weakness, and assumes worth is measured by wealth displayed. She walked into Langston Trust Bank with quiet dignity and a simple request. They looked at her clothes, her calmness, her lack of flashy labels, and decided she was beneath them. But what they didn't see, what they chose not to see, was her humanity. This story is a reminder that the people we disregard, dismiss, or disrespect may hold more strength, grace, and power than we could ever imagine. Danica never raised her voice. She didn't argue. She didn't seek revenge. She simply stood her ground, let the truth reveal itself, and let those who judged her fall by their own arrogance. And that, my friends, is what real power looks like. It's not in shouting back. It's in knowing who you are and letting that truth speak for you. Here's the lesson: never measure someone's worth by what they wear, how softly they speak, or how little they ask for. The real giants among us walk quietly. They don't flaunt status. They don't need attention. And they don't need to prove anything, because their value doesn't come from validation. It comes from character. So, to everyone listening right now, treat people with respect not because of who they know or what they own, but because they're human. We never truly know who someone is, what they've endured, or what they carry silently inside. But kindness costs nothing, and dignity, once lost, is expensive to reclaim. To anyone who's ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or mistreated, hold your head high. Like Danica, your time will come. And when it does, you won't need to shout to be heard. Thank you for listening to this story on U.S. Edifying Stories. If this touched your heart or made you reflect, I hope you'll share it. Not for numbers, not for likes, but so we all remember the kind of world we should be building, one where dignity is honored, silence isn't mistaken for weakness, and no one ever has to prove they belong. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never forget, respect speaks louder than status.